Today on the Idiot's Guide, have you ever wondered why we let the cat out of the bag or beat around the bush? Today, we're uncovering the origins and crazy histories behind some of the most common expressions and phrases we've used over the years.
Don't have a cow, man.
Stick around because we're going to quiz each other to test our knowledge on products that we often call by their brand names rather than their actual names.
Nope.
Can you tell the difference between Kleenex and a tissue or Band-Aid and an adhesive bandage? Find out which one of us has the bigger thinker. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, aka the Profit Hacker, and I'm joined by the man in charge, Mr. Joe Hassel. Welcome to the Idiot's Guide. So on this episode, I want to kind of figure out what I know there are lots. I went and did this search to find out all these different phrases and random things. And on a part of this, the next section that we're going to go over is probably like, I picked out some of them. There were so many. I found a library of them, and I could search and find certain ones. Some of the ones that I knew weren't in there. And I know that like you wanted to talk about some specific stuff that we're going to go over too. Like literally it's some of the stuff is like racially derogatory kind of stuff. So it's pretty bad stuff, but we'll be careful. We are on YouTube, so we don't want to like get dinged because we talk about stuff. But you know, one of the things that I want to start off with is a story about a guy named Josh Tatum. Now, Josh Tatum, he was around 1883. I don't know if he wasn't born then, but around 1883, Josh noticed that there was this minted nickel that they were making at the time that was about the same size as a $5 gold piece. So he and his buddy went to his friend and he's like, "Hey, do you know what I should do? I should use this. It's about the same size, roughly the same weight. Usually, nickels are going to be a little bit heavier, I believe." But the idea was if he made enough of these nickels look like $5 gold pieces by gold plating them, he could essentially make millions. And he made millions, amassing a small fortune before he was caught.
Wow. So
what's the significance about this story? What's so fancy about this guy, Josh? Well, if you think about the idea of tricking, okay? Or, oh man, like I tricked you. I played a prank on you. Or I'm kidding. Like you say, I'm just kidding. Or have you ever heard the word just joshing you?
Hey, I'm just joshing.
Josh Tatum is the reason why that exists. Because Josh joshed everyone with $5 gold pieces and made millions.
So we are referencing a counterfeiter whenever we say I'm just joshing.
I mean, it's fitting, right?
Yeah.
You know? So like, I think that the interesting thing about this is like just joshing you is something that like, I think it's not very often used anymore, but over history, like if you go back to, you know, the 1900s, it was a normal thing, right? And nearly 100 years of it, you know, over that. So it's kind of an interesting thing how the terms that we use or some of the things that we say, the phrases that we say, have such a unique history about them.
Yeah.
You know?
Without us even realizing it.
Yeah. That's kind of one of the like weird aspects of it is like not knowing that this story is about Josh Tatum and his, you know, his like endeavors, like you said, as a counterfeiter, you know, so I'm sitting here like, you know, I'm just kidding. I was just teasing you, like just joshing you. No, I'm literally made something up, pretended and tried to pass it off as something else, you know?
So just joshing you is really more like,
scammers or skid marks.
Yeah. No, I was going to say it's more like gaslighting.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're like, hey, this is no. It's a $5 gold coin. That's what this is. And you're like, no, it feels like a nickel. You know, you're like, no, it's a $5 gold coin.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, like, when I'm standing by a barbecue and I'm like, you want to hear something worthless?
I am pretty wisdomous.
I've got lots of them. I'm a dad, so I'm supposed to.
There you
right?
go. That's exactly how it works.
So before we go on, don't forget to subscribe to The Idiot's Guide on your favorite podcast platform or right here on YouTube for more fun facts and updates. Now, let's dive into more of the world of weird phrases and see what secrets we can uncover.
All right.
So I mentioned at the very beginning, beat around the bush.
Don't beat around the bush,
Right.
Leonard.
Now, beat around the bush is one of those that, like, I guess I'm like, if you read the notes that we have, I think that you're gonna get the answer. But if you don't know the notes, what do you think beat around the bush means?
So I actually do know this one. So not from the notes.
Okay.
But it's
What is let's say this. What does beat around the bush mean now? If we say, let's
so
beat around
to
the bush.
avoid a topic.
Okay.
So you don't want to directly talk about something. So
Yeah.
you're going to beat around the bush, kind of euphemistically talk about something.
Typically you're like, quit beating around the bush, right?
Yeah.
Don't beat
Just
around the bush.
get to the point.
Just give me the facts.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, it's really odd that, like, when we say we're going to beat around the bush, I was like, I never plan on trying to do that unless I'm scared of addressing a topic, and then
Yeah.
I just do it naturally.
Yeah.
So where does beat around the bush come from, Joe?
So it is a hunter's term, an older hunter's term. So they would have someone go out and beat the bushes to get the game to come out.
Yeah.
So they actually still do this. So there's a pheasant farm not far from us, but they do a lot of this with pheasant hunting. So they will actually have people that go out there and they will beat the bushes so that the pheasants come out, so that the hunters can shoot them. I am not a hunter. I just know this term. My dad is a hunter. And so, but that's the idea, is they still do this kind of behavior. I don't think they call it beating around the bush, but yeah, they go out and they beat the bushes to get the birds to come out, or whatever wildlife they're hunting.
As I imagined, like, as I was looking this up, I imagined somebody getting hired, and we're like, well, what are you guys hunting? And they're like, oh, bear. You're like, you want me to hit a bush until the bear comes out? Like,
A bush beater for bear.
that
That would
you
not
can
be an
hire
ideal
somebody
job.
else. Like, I'm not interested. Okay, so let the cat out of the bag. Don't
Let
read
the
it.
cat
Look at it. Look
out
at
of the
this, and I
bag.
want you to know, like, what does let the cat out of the bag mean?
So I know let the cat out of the bag is to share a secret, but
Okay.
this one I do not know the history of.
Yeah, come on, let the cat out of the bag. You're like, all right, yeah, this is the truth about what's going on, which is absolutely pretty in line with the story behind it. It's another medieval, like the last one was a hunting story from medieval times. This one as well is a hunting story from medieval times. Basically, it means that, like, the meat vendors, or like the meat markets, they would have, like, their different livestock. So you have pigs and cattle and different cuts of meat, chickens, and they would like, basically similar weight. They would use a cat because a cat was cheaper and abundant. They could grab a cat from the alley and kill it and put it in a bag, and they would nobody'd know. So they could sell this bag marked pig, and it's actually a cat. So the story goes that, basically, like, the dishonesty of this, an unsuspecting customer takes this bag and comes home and empties the contents, and it's a cat that gets let out of the bag. So you're revealing the dishonesty about the situation. It's not far off from its reality.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that that's how it all stemmed from, is, like, literally you're letting a dead cat out of a bag because you bought a nice cut of a chicken or whatever it is, and you're hoping that you're going to have family dinner and it's cat stew for the night. That sounds disgusting, but
Alrighty then.
I don't know, somewhere I've heard in, like, Thailand, maybe they do that. I don't know. Like, they always joke about that. Like, you're like, don't eat it at that restaurant over there. That one's, you never see any stray cats around that building.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one is scot-free.
We're off scot-free.
All right.
What do you think scot-free is?
I have no idea.
Okay. Have you ever heard it?
I've heard it. I know scot-free. I know it's getting away with something.
Yeah. Like you get away, get off scot-free kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
No punishments, no consequences.
So this is from my people, the Scandinavian people. But the word is actually originated as Old Scandinavian is scat. Okay. And scat meant tax or like a debt owed in essence. And it eventually historically evolved into scot. And I don't know why, but basically scat-free is you get off without paying for anything like tax or debt. So it hasn't really evolved, but other than the change from scat to scot. And I don't know if that was because, you had British people around the Scandinavians that were like, oh no, you don't pronounce that word like that. You pronounce it Scots.
Yeah, I follow a linguist on YouTube, and they talk a lot about the great vowel shift.
Yeah.
And so that's probably where it went from scat to scot, was during the great vowel shift.
They were like, we want to disassociate from these like common languages that the northern pagans, used.
Well, no, it was just a natural change in the way that pronunciation happened that just went through a lot of different language bases.
Okay. Well, that one is kind of one of those things. Yeah, you get off scot-free. It's pretty self-explanatory. Again, historically, it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, when we were doing the swearing one, we found a lot of those that, common swear words were actually still the same.
Yeah.
But some of them were way different.
Here's one that I think is unique, but I liked this one because it stood out to me. It is definitely not what you think it is. Okay. So if I say, you son of a gun, what does that mean?
So when you say it like that, it's like, I always see it as gee golly.
Or, well, son of a gun. Okay?
Right.
Like that. Okay. But if I'm like, you son of a gun, okay, there's other colloquial terms that they use in place of that. And honestly, knowing the history now, I do like it still works, All
right.
But the original context is based off of son of a gun, not the other more aggressive.
Now I do.
Terms.
I have heard a history of this one. I'm avoiding looking at the screen because I don't want to see what the notes say.
Okay.
But I do. There was an episode of Mythbusters that actually talked about this.
Okay.
So I don't know if what I saw on there is the same information that you found.
So do you want me to give you the history that I found, or do you want to?
What I heard on Mythbusters, I think this was like a first or second season of Mythbusters. Back then they had the folklorist, or I can't remember what her exact title was, but it was during the Civil War. Women who were impregnated by enemy soldiers who were encamping in the area would say that they were shot in fire, from the crossfire.
Okay.
And so it went through a soldier's family jewels and hit the women in their pelvic area, and it carried the semen with it, and they became impregnated with that soldier's child.
Man, that is an incredible bullet. Honestly, like,
so they were the son of a gun.
Okay. That's okay. So did Mythbusters like bust that?
Oh yeah, that's completely disproven. That's not. But that's the history of the term, from what they explain. But that was...
So maybe that was the myth? But they busted it. Okay, that's good, because that's totally not it at all.
All right.
That is a busted myth. But you're close. So in the 1800s, so I think about Civil War, right? But this was Royal Navy. So British Royal Navy, you're talking about that. During the 1800s, officers on the ships were allowed to bring their wives onto the ships. So And obviously shenanigans went on. They're bored at sea, then they might as well do something. So, like everybody else does when they're bored. So,
all right.
The babies that were born aboard the ship that were born were delivered in the spaces between the broadside guns. So you have the broadside side of the ship, right? And in between there, you had these spots where there was enough room. They didn't have delivery wards. They didn't have a hospital, so they had to find a place to deliver a baby. And so between the broadside guns, oftentimes were the delivery spots for those babies. So when you're talking about a son of a gun, it's because of the Royal Navy officers impregnating their wives on deployment.
That's interesting. I wonder if there is some similarity in that, that's maybe the UK history of the same phrase versus the US history of the same phrase.
Yeah.
Being, from two different sources. Maybe they heard it and so they used it colloquially for very different things. But
and I'm sure in the early 1800s, there's still quite a lot of disdain for, like the Royal Navy. They're like, we're not going to take that story. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up with a story where a bullet passes through a guy's thingy and it impregnates the lady that passes through her. It's like, okay. I feel like this one's much more believable, but okay, whatever. Like, if you're magic.
Well, I mean, it was their way of protecting the integrity of the young lady. So
she was not deflowered. She was
shot.
She was shot. I think about in the Army when we talk about our weapons, we use that. Like, this is my rifle. This is my gun. This is for shooting. This is for fun.
Oh, gosh. We might need to cut that. I don't know.
Why? It's not. There's just no pictures to the editors, please.
Yeah. Wow. Moving on.
Okay. All right. So on the same page.
We're on the same page.
That's the last one.
All
on
right.
the same page. Now, like this one, it's pretty common sense, but it's history. Like, what does on the same page mean to you?
We're in agreement.
We're in agreement.
We understand
right?
the same.
Are we on the same page? Like if we had a disagreement or something like that, I'm going to go, yeah, I want to get on the same page with everybody. Right.
Yeah. Or explaining something. You're done explaining. Are we on the same page with that? Yeah. We're on the same page.
Yep. So realistically, actually, it's more about, it's kind of in the same vein, but it's not, in the sense that it's not necessarily coming to an agreement or coming to that. It's literally verifying you're on the right page. So if you're in a room like a choir and you have everybody getting ready to sing a song, you got to make sure everyone's on the same page, right?
Yeah, that actually makes total sense.
Absolutely. If you're on the wrong page and you start that,
thought about that.
Or I imagine my son, he plays in a band, and if he doesn't read, if he's on the wrong page of music and starts up at the wrong spot, like, he's going to stick out like a sore thumb. I wonder if that's a phrase.
Thing sticks out like a sore thumb.
It is.
We'll have to look that one up. Supplement. Follow up another podcast episode.
It'll just be at the very end. Writing on the editing. So also the other thing is probably more likely it's like a business meeting. Okay, everybody, if you look at, example C on page 4, are we all on the same page? Yeah, okay. Or like a class, if you're, hey, turn to your books, turn in your books to this page, are we all on the same page? So it's like checking. Like, we're good? Okay, we can proceed with this information. So it's not that exciting. I think, coming to an agreement is far more exciting than, just confirming that we're all ready for
literally
more
on the same page.
But
yeah, I mean, it makes sense where that came from. That's interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of pages, though, we have a new page. I guess it's not a new page. It's been a minute, but we're still just trying to kind of get that word out there. What page?
So
is
do you
that?
mean our Patreon?
That's exactly what I was talking about. We are on the same page.
We do have a Patreon.
Oh.
It is patreon.com/TIG TIG_HPF. So that's the Idiot's Guide and Hot Potato Finance. So we combine them in one. And so on that Patreon, we want you to join. We want you to support this. Gives us an opportunity to do a lot more, to do a lot of research, to be able to continue this podcast, and be able to give you all of this useless information to help you in your everyday life, which probably won't ever happen.
Abundant uselessness.
Knowledge is power. So don't ever get rid of knowledge. So we will be here providing you that power every day.
What is that website? It's patreon.com/TIG_HPF.
Correct.
All right. Cool. Well, no one likes to be cheated or swindled, right?
Right.
I mean, everyone who dealt with a, nickel weighted $5 gold coin probably got pretty irritated by that. But there's other ways of saying those very words that would literally offend an entire culture or race of people.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
What are some of those words? Let's talk about at least one of them.
Fortunately, they are not as common anymore. Yeah. When we were young, they were very common.
They were.
And so fortunately, they've kind of gone by the wayside as we move along. But the problem when we do that is sometimes we forget and we hear those words again and we forget where they came from. I think that's kind of our generation is we heard these terms from older generations, so we started using them, not knowing where they came from. And so it's important, and this is where that knowledge is power. It's important that we understand where these words come from so that hopefully we never use them again. Mm-hmm. So that's really important. And so we use these terms not to denigrate, but to educate so that we don't use these terms. So I just want to be very clear about that. So the terms that I grew up with were gypped and Jewed. Okay. So I got gypped or I got Jewed. Okay. So something I got stolen, I got taken advantage of. Something happened to where I was on the losing end.
And I'm pretty sure like even gypped still is more commonplace. Like you'll hear it.
Yeah.
I think Jewed is at this point blatantly offensive.
Yeah, I think
enough to where like you culturally, if we were having a conversation and use that in reference, like we're gonna get beat up.
Yeah, yeah. I think that one's a little bit more obvious. I don't think a lot of people realize where gypped comes from.
Right, and I think that's like that overt. Is it overt? Covert? Overt? I can't remember what it was like when you're.
I think it's a little bit of both, actually.
Yeah.
Some people, I mean, it's used covertly to make an overt statement about a group.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So where do they come from? So the word gypped is originated basically. It's Roma people or
Romani.
Romanian. Yeah.
No, not Romanian. Romani.
Romani.
Yep. That's actually a common mistake.
Okay.
So the Romani genetic history, they trace it back to northwestern India. So they're not Romanian.
Okay.
They are Romani.
Interesting.
And so they are, so if you know the term gypsy, that is another offensive word. So
which is weird because some people, like, they'll call themselves that.
No, they don't. Romani people do not call themselves gypsies.
I'm trying to, like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
I've met people who have referred to themselves as that, but maybe they're just not Romanian, so they just decide to.
Yeah,
like now I'm going to be this.
Yeah, cultural appropriation is where some of that comes in.
We call, like, when I was overseas, when we first got to kind of the mobilization area in combat, our unit was in the staging encampment and waiting for all of our equipment. We had nothing. So we had literally the bags that we came with, and we were all sleeping in this mass tent. They had very few latrines. So we created this, like, no place to do laundry or anything like that. And we were there for like 2 weeks. So everything we did was like washing clothes was with water bottles or non-potable water and hanging it out on the tent like lines. And we actually they started calling us the Gypsy Platoon because we were there for so long that we just kind of like made stuff happen because we needed it.
Well, and that's actually part of the history of the Romani culture. So Romani are travelers. So they don't necessarily stay in one place for very long. They're transient people because they move from area to area. And so that's where that idea of gypsy comes in, is that they are coming from their original place and they're moving and taking over someone else's land.
Okay.
And so gypsy was an offensive term used by others toward Romani people to denigrate them, to make them feel less than, to shine them out as different.
Well, if they're coming into another territory and taking it over, somebody just got gypped.
And again, that's where the idea of
it
gypped
becomes a derogatory term in that sense. Like, I got impacted by gypsies, they shortened the term.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it's really negative.
The entire spectrum of that is just extremely offensive. And the Romani people have spent generations trying to get all of those terms from being used. And over the last couple of decades, it's had significant impact. And so you hear a lot less about gypsies and a lot more about Romani. But it is a really offensive term, even to call them gypsies. But to say you got gypped is where a lot of that comes from, is because they would come in. And a lot of times it would just be unused land that they came in and started using.
Yeah.
It's in, if anyone's ever read Sherlock Holmes, there is, I can't remember which story it is with Sherlock Holmes, but the police, someone was murdered, and immediately the police, their first suspicion is the Romani people who were encamping on a field next to this house where the guy was murdered. And so it is, I mean, culturally, it is historically very offensive towards Romani people. And it's part of that reason that they are strangers. And so they don't trust strangers. And so they call them whatever terms in order to be derogatory, to be dismissive of those groups.
So why do you think that, like, in the same, like I mentioned that cheated and swindled are kind of correlating, like synonymous with these things. And that to me is hard to, I think about, like, we can unpack that history to where you're like, where gypped came from. But then I go, like, I even feel uncomfortable saying it, but saying Jude.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, what do I do in that situation? Like, I don't think I've ever thought or used that term. Mm-hmm. I've just kind of been that way. And so I'm just, I guess, does it have a similar history?
It is similar. So there are stereotypes for Jewish people.
Oh, yeah.
That every Jewish mother wants their son to be a doctor. You know,
well, they always talk about the wealth, the ability for them to generate wealth, mm-hmm. their prosperity. You know, there's always kind of like almost like a tone of jealousy behind the amount of success that you know the Jewish culture has.
Yeah. And there are a lot of, I mean, neither of us are Jewish, so I mean, we can't really talk too much about that. But there are a lot of Jewish comedians who will joke about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And how these stereotypes are there. And so we don't want to further those stereotypes, but that's where the term Jude comes from, is that you would, in a deal with a Jewish person, they are so business savvy that when you haggle with them, you're always going to be on the losing end.
Yeah.
And so you got Jude because you got the short straw in the deal.
I mean, I always admire that business savviness, you know.
Well, but again, it's a stereotype.
Yeah, you're right.
Not all, just like, I mean, this is what I use. Not all Americans are fat and speak with a Southern drawl and love having their guns in their trucks. But that's the American stereotype.
That's true.
And so it's the same thing.
If you go overseas, that everyone's big, dumb, and has guns.
Everyone's got that fat belly. They talk with their drawl, and they've got that gun rack in the back of their truck.
When they don't learn another language, they just yell English louder.
They
and
just
slower.
yell English really loud to that French man, trying to make them understand.
It's so sadly true.
But it's the same. Those stereotypes exist, and so I mean, as much as we try to avoid it, it exists, and the Jewish culture is one that does get stereotyped a lot, and victimized a lot for their background. But that's one of the things, is that there's the stereotype that they are so business savvy and that they are sneaky about that. And so they will use their skill to gain the advantage in any business deal. And so you get Jude. And so that's where that term comes from. And the same with getting gypped, not only with the stolen land, but Romani. See, I still do that. I still fall into calling them gypsies. I really try not to. But the Romani people are, they don't have a home base per se. And so they didn't have an infrastructure. So they would trade for everything. And so they were performers, historically, traveling performers. And so they would trade, and they were so savvy with their trades and all of this that you got gypped in the trade, similar to getting Jewed. And so it's these ideas of interactions with them that cause these terms in order to make someone feel better about a negotiation that maybe went bad for them. And so it's not their fault the negotiation went bad. It was the other person's fault. And so it's placing blame on someone else in order to, and using cultural stereotypes to move that forward.
So using something more in the sense of saying, I got cheated, you know, like actually use the word that you're using instead of a stereotypical derogatory term for a entire culture of people.
Exactly.
You know,
see, fortunately more now, we're, instead of using either of those terms, we say we got screwed, which that in and of itself has its own background, which given the nature of the episode so far, we probably shouldn't go into.
What?
Well, even getting screwed, you know, there is another common usage.
So on the other terms that we're talking about in this episode here, we're going to go on to one that has actually a couple different that I've used personally. This one not necessarily was what I don't use this one very often in the form that it originally is, but I've heard it other ways, plenty of other, including racially derogatory ways. I'm not going to say any of those, but the one that I do use typically is jimmy rigged. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this one's jimmy rigged, or, you know, like, but the actual term is jury rigging.
Yep.
Okay. And jury rigging is, it's a nautical term, right? So it's talking about basically fitting the ship, or fitting the mast with all of its ropes and the like everything to basically make the sail what it is.
Yep.
Right. I don't boat. I don't know anything about nautical, anything like that. But like the idea of shrouds and sails essentially. But it's been around for a very long time. They would talk about, oh, this person like did all the jury rigging, you know, but then you hear jury rigging, like literally rigging a jury.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have this like, okay, are you talking about that jury rigging? Are you talking about a nautical term?
It's also synonymous with like MacGyvering.
But yeah. Like that's why I said Jimmy rig.
Yeah.
Like I use the word Jimmy rig, you know, interchangeably, I guess, in this sense, meaning the same thing. I'm like, yeah, like MacGyvering is one of them.
That in and of itself is its own type of,
is still not the same thing
switch.
as, you know, it's using synonyms to synonyms that are not actually the description of what you're doing. You're like,
and MacGyvering something. So I think this is also something that's kind of going by the wayside. But MacGyver was, for those of you that don't know, a TV show where he would make like an entire car out of a toothbrush and a string of wire.
they have another. They have a newer series. I think it's on.
Do they?
Yeah, and I think
Okay.
I thought like Paramount has it. Or one of the
So
one of the networks has a new remake of it over the last probably 4 or 5 years, and it's a dude that they literally tried to cast a guy that had the same kind of mullet hair that MacGyver had. Not exactly the same, but just as terrible. Except like this dude now looks like he's 12. Not
oh,
MacGyver kind of still looked a little bit older, but
Yeah.
I mean, when I was younger, he looked older. Even now, though, if I look back and I watch one of the old episodes, he looks older. This kid looks like he's 12, and I'm like, that's MacGyver, like that. That's like, dude, what's the young Sheldon kind of thing?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that's young MacGyver. That's what
Yeah,
you
there
guys
you go.
did. Okay,
Young
I
MacGyver.
get it.
But yeah,
You know?
so jury rigging something is in now terms is like making something out of nothing.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of people that I know of use jerry rigged
Yeah.
instead of jury rigged
Yep.
or Jimmy rigged.
And essentially that's just like scot and scat.
Yeah.
It's evolved from the original word was jury rigging.
Yep.
So,
But yeah, so it's interesting to think about, there are these terms. And I always thought that, jury rigged was some kind of offensive term. And it's interesting when I actually researched this probably 5-10 years ago. And because I wanted to see, this sounds like derogatory. I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing something wrong. And I looked it up and I went, oh, it's not at all. It's an old nautical term. So, all right, there's a word I can keep using.
yeah, I mean, for the most part, there are some terms obviously
There are some
that are
versions
like, no,
of
don't do
it that are completely
Don't
wrong.
do
But
that.
the original jury rigged, that is perfectly good to use.
I mean, unless you're that kind of an offensive person and don't care, I'm not giving you permission. I'm not going to tell you what to do either.
If they're that kind of person, I doubt they're watching.
Yes. For those who pay attention to this show and enjoy it, yes, it's quiz time. That's exactly what we're going to do. So
There you go.
I want to jump into this real quick. I asked you to pick 5.
Yes. And
And
I've got my
I
5
picked
here.
5. And like, why don't we go out of 5, best out of 5? I'm really excited about mine, but
Okay.
do you want to go first?
You
Do
go
want me to
first. You go first.
Okay. All right.
Challenge my big brain.
So first one, bubble wrap. Yeah. That's challenging.
I honestly did not think that was a brand name. It's bubble wrap.
It's trademarked.
Oh, you know what? No, it is because on Mythbusters, I love Mythbusters. On Mythbusters, they are not allowed to call it bubble wrap.
Correct.
That's right.
Because it's sealed air packaging. But bubble wrap, we call it. It changed the world when it comes to everything that you get in the mail. But you can't call it bubble wrap because it's sealed air packaging. Breathalyzer.
That, I would imagine, is a brand name. It's got to be called like a alcohol level tester or something like that. That's the generic descriptor.
Breathalyzer came a little bit later, but not much later.
Okay.
Because the first name for it was not as technical. It scientifically, yes, it does that. So in the description, it is this. It used to be called the Drunkometer. That's the best name ever. But literally, they blow into a balloon, and then they measure that balloon, then gets filtered through the filter, and it measures their alcohol level.
Wow.
Okay, and that was trademarked in 1936. Chapstick.
That one I know is a brand name because it's labeled all across it. It's got to be lip balm.
There you go.
All right.
Boom. That's it. Okay. So you can call it lip balm all day long. All day long. Do you have any lip balm? But how many people walk into a store and go, "Where's your chapstick?"
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everyone says chapstick.
This one's fun. Just like the Drunkometer. Q-tips.
Yeah. Oh, this one, they are, okay, I know some of the history of this, if I can remember it.
Okay.
Q-tips are cotton swabs, is the actual generic name of it.
Okay.
Q-tips, I can't remember. The Q was something to do with babies because they developed this to be used to clean either the ears of babies or something along with babies. and there was something to do with the Q, and I can't remember what the Q was.
So the Q stands for quality. Okay. Cotton swabs is pretty much the description of what it is.
All right.
Okay. But the original name before they changed it to Q-tips was baby gaze.
I told you it was babies.
So that one was kind of it. I really liked that one. So
all right. So I've got 2.5 points out of 4 now.
yes.
All right.
All right. So now we've got the last one. Okay.
Right.
Sharpie.
Sharpie. A permanent marker is the generic term for it.
Okay.
Sharpie would have been around. I don't know if you know the trademark dates. Okay, so you know the trademark on this one. I would say it was probably trademarked in the 1940s.
Permanent marker was basically invented in 56.
Okay.
And Sharpie wasn't around or trademarked until 64.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Sweet. So I got 3.5 out of 5.
3.5 out of 5. That's not bad.
Yeah.
Let's see how terrible
All right.
I do.
So that's what? 3.5. So that's
a
70%?
pretty big thinker you got there.
All right.
All right.
Okay. Windbreaker.
I would like probably call that one like a light jacket or something to do with like weather resistant jacket.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. So I think you still get the point for that one for knowing it was jackets. I think that was pretty obvious, but it has actually since expired. So the trademark for windbreaker. So it's no longer a trademark term.
So we can use it all we want.
We can use it all we want.
Man.
Okay, here's the next one. Dumpster.
Ooh. I don't know if that would be like a large trash receptacle. I know that trash receptacle is probably part of it because it receives trash.
Dumpster was actually the first ever large trash pickup device.
Large trash pickup device. It's not a. It's
well. It's so. It comes from a company called Dempster Brothers Inc.
Okay.
So they mixed Dempster with dump to get dumpster. So okay, next one. Taser.
Ooh. Either electric or voltage projection device, probably.
Okay.
That's the best guess. No?
Nope. It is.
I'm like 0 for 3.
1 for 3. You got the windbreaker. It is a conducted energy device.
Wow.
Thomas A. Swift's electric rifle.
Interesting.
He created it, the closest version that we know of today. And growing up, one of his favorite books, the main character was Thomas Swift. And so he called it the Thomas A. Swift's electric rifle.
All right.
A taser.
Okay. 2 more.
Okay.
I can redeem myself.
Okay. So the weed eater or the weed whacker. I grew up with weed whacker. I've heard other people say weed eater.
I don't know. Honestly,
Okay.
like I'm going to guess like, yard tool,
It is a string trimmer.
Okay. I've heard that. Yeah.
Okay. So the actual product is a string trimmer, but both weed eater and weed whacker are both trademark terms for string trimmers.
It's not even fair.
Okay. So not on that one. Okay. And here's the last one.
Okay.
Styrofoam.
Um,
This one's a fun one.
I like puffed plastic. Like that's literally what styrofoam is just.
So give me an example of a styrofoam product.
The packaging that like the puff packaging that's formed around like a new TV screen that you buy.
Okay.
That it's formed around in order to safely,
Can you think of any other styrofoam products?
Like a cooler.
Okay.
Like you can buy the little styrofoam cooler or egg cartons.
None of those are styrofoam.
What?
None of those are styrofoam.
What? What is styrofoam?
So styrofoam is a trademark of the Dow Chemical Company starting in 1947, and it is for a specific extruded polystyrene foam that is exclusively made for sheaths for construction products. So it's like the insulation that goes in the walls or in ceilings.
Really?
So that is styrofoam.
Okay.
And it is a very specific for that provides insulating capacity.
But if I have a styrofoam cup,
Nope.
okay,
Doesn't provide insulation.
yes, it does.
Nope.
I can hold on to the side of a styrofoam cup with hot coffee in it and be fine.
Doesn't provide the expanded polystyrene foam, specifically does not provide, at least not the same as the extruded polystyrene that is trademarked
I feel
by
attacked.
Dow Chemical.
This is not even fair.
Yeah. So styrofoam,
Like
that
everybody calls that stuff this, and you're like, no, it's not that at all.
yeah, no,
Darn
it
it.
is a completely different process. I actually looked up all the processes and everything.
Oh, good Lord.
Completely different process. And expanded
You're out to get me.
polystyrene.
I was being nice.
I honestly thought you'd get quite a few of these. So next time you go and get a cooler or a cup, it's not styrofoam. Call it you're getting a polystyrene cup or a polystyrene cooler or polystyrene packaging.
All right, I'm going to be a sore loser, and we're done with this show. Okay, that's it. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of being accosted by the lack of thinker size that I might have. Like
all right, editing. Just put a little crown right here, and put like a little crying face on him.
Nope. Nope. All right. So a lot of things that we say can also say a lot about what generation we're from, or whether we have an old soul, our preference about swearing, or, describing something. But I think we're better off with these little nifty phrases that we run around with that can entertain and can really communicate our emotions in healthy ways. That's literally what we did, and what we're talking about. We talk about, oh, did you get Tylenol for that headache? You're like, nope, that's not. It's acetaminophen, and that's another one. Like I mentioned at the beginning, Kleenex is one. Well, my daughter doesn't even call it Kleenex. She's like, will you get me a tissue? And I'm like, what? Who are you? But we have reached the end of our show, and we've got to wrap up. And but I do want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you like the content, hit the like and subscribe button. Hit that like, because getting those likes is really, really important. It gets us to other people who might be interested in this stuff. But life's too short. So keep laughing and learning. And remember, idiots have way more fun.